What's the last thing you binged?
Binge watched the series.
Yeah.
I would say Shogun.
Shogun.
Have you seen Shogun?
Yes, I did. Actually, I wanted to ask you, what did you think of the ending?
I was really satisfied with the ending. I was surprised.
Ah,
Feeling walang spoil. The character who died in the second to the last episode,
yeah.
that was a great episode. Also, like objectively speaking, a great
Ah.
death.
Ako rin eh. Parang I saw a lot of people, including some of our friends, really disappointed because they were waiting for, di ba? Parang
Yeah,
something
yeah,
epic. Pero sabi ko, I like the whole series because it seemed like parang it was cleansing of the palate after watching everything, and the payoff is always the same.
yeah.
For me, it was like, no, the payoff is understanding the politics, di ba?
Exactly, and that the battle was actually happening unbeknownst to us. Diba? It was being won and fought off screen. That's really great. I think. Ganda. But so ayun, medyo nabitin. I understand yung feeling na nakakabitin siya, which is why even though the showrunner said they're not gonna do a season 2, now they've come out and said they're doing a season 2. So
Okay.
now maybe that's when the battle comes. It's like Game of House of Dragon. Diba? The first season was all just politics, and then now we're heading into the war.
That's right.
In the upcoming season.
But if you were a showrunner for something like that, would you feel that medyo requirement yan eh? Kailangan may payoff.
I would actually think that like a lot of the good shows, I think, subvert expectations. It's like when I didn't watch it, but I watched the last episode lang when The Sopranos ended with a cliffhanger, but also just a dinner between the family, and everybody was expecting that Tony Soprano would pass away or get killed, and he didn't. I think that's it's expected to be unexpected when it comes to series. So yeah, if I had the privilege to do a series like that, I would probably do the same thing.
What would make for a good series on the Philippines?
True.
I mean, what would make for again?
Yeah.
Let's fantasize about that. You're a showrunner, so from the start, what would be your pitch?
Well, I don't know yet. Actually, I think I read a filmmaker, I'm not sure who it was, said na the difference between, I think, a film and a series is that with series or when he was choosing, when he was sort of making a line between what would make a good film versus what would make a good series. And to him, it's if it's character driven, then if it's more character driven and you need time to build a character, that's definitely more of a series. But if it's more plot driven, when there's a like a goal, and at the end of the plot you have a goal to reach, then that's more of a film. So I think yun ang base requirement talaga for a series is really good, interesting characters.
Then the question to you
is not necessarily about the plot, because even like Shogun, for example, wasn't so plot driven. It was really character centric.
So to that point, then which character fascinates you? So sinong character ang in Philippine history ang intrigue ka?
Well, going back to Shogun lang, I think what was also nice about Shogun was, even though it was based on real people, historical figures, real events, it fictionalized the characters. So they were not tied to what actually happened in history. Right. I want to see actually more films and series like that in the Philippines that it's not necessarily a biopic. It is inspired by figures and then fictionalized, because then we can make things more interesting. I think when we talk about historical films in the Philippines, we usually think that they are biopics based on the textbooks. But when, for example, you go to Korea and you mention historical film, it actually is not the same way. They have a lot of romance. They have even like a zombie series that's set in a historical period. So I think I would like to see more of a widening of the perspective about what historical means. So I think there are a lot of really nice, interesting eras to explore. Like the revolution, for example, the Philippine Revolution, and the betrayals that went inside the politics actually behind the revolution, and the betrayals that went into it is a great thing to explore also. Our heroes when they were younger also, and they were being formed being formed, quote unquote, in Europe is another interesting thing to play around with, I think.
Oh nga, I was reading I'm reading this book, I forgot, but it was about the parallels between Jose Rizal and Jose Marti.
Mm.
And they were both ilustrados in Spain. But what was fascinating was they were the book was saying there's no evidence that they actually met. One guy, I think
Mm.
Jose Marti, is about 3 or 4 years older, and then Rizal was 4 years younger. They certainly overlapped. But sabi niya, the only evidence that we have that they overlap is the accounts of other people.
Yeah.
It's Filipino ilustrados writing to ilustrados in Cuba
Yeah.
and them exchanging notes, but there was actually no evidence that they actually interacted directly. And parang to your point, parang it's the it's the it's the observances, and it may be mythologized.
True.
It may be romanticized
True.
by some people, and yet that's what filters down to us.
True, true. I can name one specific example of that with Gomburza, for example, because with the execution, there are conflicting reports or conflicting accounts of the execution, but the one that really sticks, the one that historians cite most often, and the one that we ended up using as a reference for the film was an account of a French historian named Lachaud. I'm not sure if I am pronouncing that right, but he had a very detailed, also very dramatic account. So he was, it's from him that we have the final words of Burgos, for example, being, wala kami kasalanan, bakit kami kailangan mamatay ng ganito? The final words of Gomez na, walang dahon ang pwedeng lumipad kung hindi kahilingan ng Diyos. And then the tidbit that Zamora had been dragged up to the garrote, that's from him. But Lachaud was never in Bagumbayan. And he was just relying on accounts that had been said to him also.
Second, third-hand accounts.
Yeah.
Na yan.
But when we read it, it's very cinematic, and from a storytelling perspective, great also. So which is why we ended up referencing it.
One of the takeaways ng mga kaibigan ko who watched Gomburza, I mean, sorry to be blunt, di ba? Parang that's not the point. But it was like, ano pala Silvia Zamora eh. Di ba? But ibig sabihin ko, but it was, I don't know, like you said, di ba? All of these are based on accounts.
Yeah.
Di ba? And when we were talking about it, sabi ko, I don't know whether or not I would judge Zamora. The fact is people suffered and so on. But ang point ko lang is, yeah, but that character has a point in just showing people that one, we mythologize, we romanticize, and we could have a very warped view of what really happened. But at the end of the day, the big picture remains the same, but people are still people at the end.
People are still people. Among the three priests, for me, he was the most human, actually. The fact that he was really at the wrong place at the wrong time, which is what we get from accounts. It's really heartbreaking. And though Lachaud is the one who said that he was dragged up to the stage, I think that's been corroborated also, that he did sort of lose his sanity. And I think that's a very human reaction. But I want to say something about Zamora also. Just whenever I'm on interview, try to put it in, because we didn't really get to explore in the film. But Zamora was actually a brilliant priest, very well loved. He had gone to school at the same time as Burgos, and actually they for example, I think there was an exam where when they finished, Zamora actually had placed higher or had higher grades than Burgos. It just so happened that he had the propensity to gamble, which is a very, again, human thing. But yeah, very brilliant priest also, and an example of a life that was lost because of really injustice.
And nga, dun sa puntong yun, he's the most relatable because di ba, parang we can all relate to, damay lang ako dyan eh.
Yeah.
Di ba? Hindi naman ako. Di ba? Nadamay lang ako dyan. Nagkataon lang nandun ako. And you admit to your faults. You admit to your flaws. Yeah. And I will admit to, I gamble. Uminom ako. Pero hindi ako yun. Di ba? Yeah. Parang in that, then gave you a character na, you could say, lahat naman tayo at every point in history, di ba? If you're gonna say, wala naman palang si Zamora, then I could have put myself back in EDSA 86 and people will see na, ay, hindi man lang pala minor character yan at the end of the day, and yet you're actually very proud. No, I was there, I stood up.
True. No, exactly. And I think it's also, actually, when I first got involved in the project and I was talking to some historians about it, one of the historians had made a point to say, Gomburza technically not heroes; they are martyrs. We may remember them as martyrs. So there's that distinction. But I think most people, because we read it in our textbooks, we tend to think of them as heroes. And for us, heroes are usually, these big bombastic figures who, not single-handedly, but led the fight, led the charge, and fought. And they do not fit that mold. But I think what's important about the three priests is that um, they may not fit that mold of what a hero is, but their death actually meant so much to us as Filipinos, and I think that in and of itself has value. What what they represented. You can really see the line between their death and the writings of Rizal, because Rizal had written about them in letters. He also dedicated El Fili to the three priests. And you can really draw the line between Rizal's novels and the revolution. So I think they are definitely necessary, if not necessary, definitely important, valuable.
When you start, as you said, we start consulting historians, and even more basic than that, start looking for historians. What surprised you about the process of just looking? Is there anything about that process that surprised you, that will surprise Filipinos?
I think one thing that surprised me actually were the conflicting accounts. And actually, when I first got involved with the Gomburza, there was already a script written, because JESCOM, the Jesuit Communications, had been working on the film for a while. And the script actually went into those conflicting accounts. And when I came in, I asked myself many times, many nights, like, what's the story that we're trying to tell here? Is it really an investigation of what really happened? That didn't really interest me, to be honest.
Are you setting the record straight?
Are we setting the records? Yeah, that wouldn't interest me. But what interested me was just this little tidbit that I had first read, which is that the word Filipino had come from the secularization movement. And it started with the priests, really only intending it for it to mean Philippine-born priests, or priests born in Las Islas Filipinas. And then after Gomburza, it had spread throughout the country. So that's the story that I wanted to tell. And for me, it wasn't about those conflicting accounts. It was really trying to find that thread. And so for that, I sort of had to put horse blinders on myself and really zero in on what sources are we going to consult for this. And it's not everybody. It can't be everyone, because we can't accommodate all those conflicting accounts. So in the end, we chose the writings primarily of Father John Schumacher, who was a Jesuit, but also he had done so much research kasi on Gomburza, the secularization movement. He had written a article or a paper called Cavite Mutiny, A Definitive History. And the Cavite Mutiny is another event where there's so many conflicting accounts. But because some people were saying it was a mutiny, others meaning they had the intention of declaring independence. Others said, no, these were just disgruntled soldiers. But in Definitive History of Schumacher, he said, no, this was a mutiny. They had higher ideals, and because of what had happened in Mexico, that's why the Spanish were already beginning to lose their colonies. That's why the government then really punished the mutiny. So yeah, it was like more of like having to put those blinders.
How hard is it being a Diokno?
I don't know. I don't know what to answer.
Pang ilan, you're Pepe, di ba? So you're Jose Diokno. Pang ilang Jose Diokno ka na?
But marami kasi kami. My dad is Jose Manuel, and then all of his brothers are Jose something.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I am Jose Lorenzo. So, and I think that practice of naming the boys Jose was something that they did.
So
just
officially, there's no second, third, fourth,
kasi
seventh,
iba yung variant.
Okay. And you literally lost count.
And yeah, literally lost count of how many Joses. But I think the practice might have stopped with me. I'm not sure. But yeah, among us cousins, I think I'm the only.
Talaga.
No, I think it was hard to grow up with the name Pepe because I went to an all-boys school. It's still, I learned to love it after
Ah.
after graduating.
Ah.
But yeah, no, I think yeah, there are expectations in a way.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I ended up in film to
Ah.
get us far away, but not exactly.
Not exactly. Di ba? I
Yeah.
mean, you look at your films, never mind Gomburza, but Encuentro, for example, really one of the first films that
Mhm.
introduced you to to the people. I talk about Encuentro. Why Encuentro? Why that theme? Were you foreshadowing the arrival of
Oh, God,
Duterte? Do you realize how powerfully it had actually foreshadowed that?
well, Encuentro is a film about these two brothers. For those who haven't seen it, it's a film about these two brothers who are members of a gang, and throughout the film, we are following them because they want to leave where they live. They're being chased by a vigilante group,
Mm.
and so we basically just follow their day.
Mm.
Um, and that film, the story of that film, I came across because I was doing a documentary project where we went to jails all over the country. So this is with Rock Ed and Gang,
Yes, with
by the
Gang
way,
Kapati.
Gang Kapati,
Mm.
and uh, other filmmakers were Lourdes
Yes.
Pereira,
Mm.
Tado had
Yeah.
also made the film.
Jim
Um,
Libiran was involved here also. No?
Jim was not involved in this jail
Ah.
series. So we went to jails all over the country, Baguio, Cebu, Davao. And in this drug rehab center in Davao, I met these two brothers who were being chased by the DDS.
Hmm.
And they had checked themselves into...
DDS at this point is still refers to the Davao Death Squad,
yes.
not yet the diehard Duterte
Not yet.
supporters.
Not yet.
Ah.
And they really took the term and really co-opted it. No? But
Mm.
so yeah, they were being chased by the Davao Death Squad. They had checked themselves into the rehab facility with the hopes that it would remove them from the hit list. Pero they were not hopeful really that they would survive. Their best friend had just been killed
Yeah.
before they checked in. Like, pinasukan yung bahay ng best
Mm.
friend and nagbabaril. And I was 19 at the time, and they were 15 and 17. And that I didn't know anything about what was happening. And that experience of meeting them and talking to them really shocked me.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that's where the film came from.
Yeah, and it's important to stress. This was around 2008, 2009.
2008,
Diba?
2009, yeah.
That was a good 6-7 years
Yeah.
before Duterte actually becomes president. And this was also around the time that Leila de Lima, as Commission on Human Rights, was already looking at the
2009.
DDS. Or sometime after that,
Sometime
diba?
after,
Kasi
yes.
panahon ni Pinoy.
Yeah.
Diba? And,
Pinoy was 2010.
but
yeah.
DDS and the Davao Death Squad was already something. People weren't even whispering about it. It was something that people were talking about na, uy, sa Davao may Death Squad, di ba? Parang we talk about it. Di ba?
Yeah.
And yet between 2009, 2016, you have a good 6-7 years, not to popularize, I guess that's a bad word, but really to just show people that, not even to educate, but just to show people, hey, this is real, this is based on two brothers.
Yeah.
And it's the exact same thing, di ba? They check themselves in hoping to escape the execution.
Yeah.
And then 6-7 years later, it happens all over the country.
Yeah, well, I would see it already when we would take the film around, because we did school tours. It was not really released in cinemas, but we did school tours, and we would get a lot of reactions. Parang okay, kasi well, the two brothers are killed at the end of the film by a vigilante who's played by Jim Libiran, and we would get reactions kasi we would start talking after the film about how it was wrong, and we would get reactions na parang no. Tama naman, dapat pinatay yung mga yan. And it was not these are not isolated reactions. In every single screening we had, there was a reaction like that. So yeah, after that, after the film, and then 6 years later, 7 years later, when Duterte was elected, I think I really also as a filmmaker had like a big crisis. As like, how can I say that films have the power to shape things, to add to the discourse? If my film, or maybe not to generalize about film, but my film was really not effective in having that point across. So I still don't know the answer to that really.
When you say crisis, what do you mean?
like, what am I even doing this for? Basically, if I had wanted to tell this story in order to maybe change things or to show people that it was not right, or to at least inspire some empathy.
Because you did have a
people.
point. You did want to make a point
Yeah,
about it. You're not just, di ba, parang ganyan naman yung mga storytellers. I'm just telling a story. Di ba? Parang bahala na kayo.
I don't believe in that.
You don't?
I don't believe in that. I think everything has, even the way we frame a camera in itself has a message. So the stories that we tell have messages, and we all have motivations for telling the story. So to say that something is just a story that has no message behind it, then it's either I think that's either wrong, a lie, or disingenuous at best, but or mababaw. Yeah.
Or a cop-out.
Or a cop-out. Yeah, exactly.
Diba?
Exactly.
Parang wala nagbago, pero hindi ko naman gusto magbago.
No, for me, it was like
No, but how did when you say, something like a near crisis or a crisis for you, how did that actually manifest? You actually thought, I'll go into another field, or I'll find something. Really?
Yeah, I did. So yeah, well, for me, the base was, at least I hope my film inspires empathy in people, and then getting that reaction, not getting that empathy, really like made me question my ability, but also why I do things. So I after Encuentro made 2 other films, but really around 2016 stopped making movies, and then just I did a lot of things. Went into advertising also, just to make money, because not filmmaking isn't so lucrative, especially independent filmmaking.
Okay.
And yeah, maybe really disconnecting myself from that, and parang social issues, or filmmaking as a development tool or whatever. But yeah.
I ask because I think my side of the sector is going through that exact same crisis. I have a lot of colleagues, old and young. Immediately after Duterte left and matatapos na, election na, there was, I would say, also a crisis, individually and also a sector, because we were all collectively and individually, and I know individuals who were asking it explicitly, why are we doing this? If, I mean, the existential question was not bakit ito ang nanalo, or bakit, it wasn't that. Tanggap nila at the end of the day, hindi, nanalo talaga si Bongbong, di ba? And tanggap nila at the end of the day, Duterte lasted all 6 years. But the existential question for us, and I think this is what you're saying also, was, why are we doing this kung wala naman palang nakikinig? Or meron nga nakikinig, but we're not actually changing minds.
Yeah. And yung mga nakikinig are those whose minds don't need to be changed. Yeah. It's still I think a question, a crisis. Really.
How did the film industry, you feel, handle those 6 years? Because again, I think now people are coming to realize and even admit on media side na, no, we were cowed. We were scared. There was a chilling effect.
So my reaction to it was really to disconnect from film. So yeah, those 8 years I really didn't really catch up with people and really ask, because I was dry. Honestly, I didn't know how. A lot of people, they were asking like to make a film about it. I couldn't. I really couldn't.
Why? Because you were afraid, or you just felt, I mean, whatever dry means.
Maybe fear was there, but I had nothing in me. I didn't know how to tackle it, and I still don't know. Kasi I really still don't know. Because if I always went back to, like, if I want to change minds in a way, is film even the way to do it? Kasi you make a film, you spend millions of pesos or whatever on it, and then you don't know if people are going to come to the cinemas or not. And the people who come to the cinemas are probably people who want to see your film anyway. So what minds are you changing then? So yeah, I still ask myself, if film is the right way to do things. And I'm talking about theatrical, full-length films. Short films are different, I think. So
In what way? They're more powerful or not? Or they're less,
well,
they have less impact?
well, I mean, because you can make a film now on TikTok.
That's
Use your phone, and I see a lot of creators doing it. It's like they have,
like your dad.
yeah, yeah. So they shoot with their phone to one, actually even less, 1 minute. It's entertaining, and then at the end there's a little bit of a
Mm.
a twist,
Mm.
and those little things, I think that's what changes minds. And that's what really excites me now. So yeah, we're doing it with
Yeah.
my dad. Spent the last, ever since because he decided to run when the killings started, and so since then we've really been working together on the making that content. So a lot of what I parang had I wanted to do on the advocacy part, I can do it with him.
How hard is that for you? I mean, from directing full features to saying na, hindi, ito eh, di ba, nandito yung mga nanonood, nandito yung mga bata, nandito yung mga Pilipino, nasa TikTok, parang,
I love TikTok.
Talaga?
I really love TikTok. I think.
How would you grade your
Well,
game?
no, okay, sorry. I have to say, I not TikTok specifically because I think
Short form.
short form. I mean, yeah. Short form. I think there's a lot to be discussed about that platform itself.
Yeah.
But yeah,
How do
short
you like-
form social media content.
How do you like the vertical format?
It's really a different format.
Yeah.
And you really have to shoot specifically for it. I like it.
Yeah.
But for example, now in advertising, you have to shoot both the vertical and the horizontal, and it becomes a little bit more cumbersome. But it's fine. And then there's so much science that goes behind it. Like they say, like in the first 3 seconds, you should already have something. Like if it's an ad, you have to have the logo or branding. So yeah, there's a lot of science behind that vertical format.
Yeah, the science is a good word. Parang how do you deal with it as an artist? How does an artist deal with the science and having to play along with the algorithm?
True. There was a journalist recently who had noticed that his videos about the West Philippine Sea were not being pushed. So I think that's definitely something we need to look into. Because if a lot of people are on these platforms and then the algorithm is literally shaping what we talk about in the country, then yeah, there's a lot to be talked about.
What does your algorithm feed you that people would be surprised by? I mean, 2 things, diba? And I ask this of all my guests. What does your algorithm feed you that makes sense? That's me. And then what has it fed you that surprised you about yourself? Nah, I didn't know that I would actually get into this.
So on Facebook, one time I may have clicked on a video that showed a snake on Facebook, and now Facebook only gives me snake
and you like
videos. No, but because I'm afraid of snakes, so I'm like, so it gives that reaction. There was a good while that talking about mga embarrassing things, but yeah, there was a good while that I was into pimple popping.
Pimple popping, yeah.
It gives you like a good
blackheads.
Blackhead removal. But yeah, I know I like watching funny stuff.
Okay. So what's your relationship now with films?
So I think I came into film as a younger filmmaker wanting to make statements, and I realized that at least for me, that shouldn't be the case. So over the last few years, I've really sort of changed my perspective on films. Like I'm as a filmmaker not here to jam a statement down your throats. I'm here to tell a story, a good story, great characters and a great plot. And then if there's a message, and there will be a message, that's not it won't be necessarily hit, it won't hit you over in the head, and it's not the end all and be all. So I want to do more genre films now. I'm working on a horror film, working on a musical. And what I actually liked about Kumburza also is that it sort of was a drama in a way, but it did have a message, but people of all sort of political shades had actually seen something and liked something about it. So it did have a broader sort of appeal, and that's what I sort of want to do with the films.
Mm.
Send in, yeah, just tell stories.
Yeah, I think one of the things that transformed, and again, I think it's true for media also. Um, I think media, whether they admit it or not, has an agenda to influence people, as you were saying. Parang you try to be objective, but there is a certain level of editorializing, and you do have a vision for where society should go. But given that crisis and that reflection on ano ba to? Wala naman nakikinig, di ba? Wala naman.
Yeah.
I think one thing that happened was there was a change in us in that we were forced to confront na maybe walang nakikinig sa inyo dahil kayo hindi kayo nakikinig sa amin. Di ba? I
That's a
mean,
good
I saw
point.
that in the elections. Di ba?
That's
Parang,
a good point.
I mean, people were, you know, regardless of your political color, and you could tell, di ba?
Yeah.
One caller in particular was really criticized for, you keep insisting that we don't have the right values. You keep insisting that
Yeah.
we're not smart, na bobo kami. You keep insisting. But I think one reflection at the end of the day was, you're the guys missing the point. You're supposed to be journalists and reporters, and you refuse to listen to us. We've been saying for the longest time na we understand kung ba't kailangan namatayan. Di ba? Parang whether you judge that or not, but people were not listening to a big segment of Philippine society na you don't know what life is for us.
And actually, I do see that a lot in the political side. Like, we tend to talk down and talk at instead of talk with. So yeah, like for example, the thinking, like with my dad, we were talking about how to reach out to more people with legal concerns, just to spread information about what the law says. So we started with, it would be the first instinct was, okay, let's just make short form videos explaining the law, but didn't really work. It's only when we started asking ourselves, okay, where are people? And that's, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and what do they like on these platforms? Oh, we noticed there was a good population that likes life hacks. So that's where the idea of having legal life hacks came from. But it started with asking, where are the people? What do they want? And then we sort of meet in the middle. And that's what surprises me with a lot of people who do comms. Like, they don't take that into consideration. It's always, what do I want to say? And not what are people saying, or what do they want? But I did read, I'm not sure where, an interesting statistic from the political side also, na apparently social media doesn't necessarily convert. It's still traditional media.
Yeah, it could be.
It raises awareness, yes. But in terms of conversion and changing minds, it's still with news sources that are trusted. It's hard. Because when I saw that statistic that social or news on social media, and this is mga unvetted posts, because we tend to think that, oh, it does convince people, but I did see a statistic that it doesn't. That people do tend to still look to the traditional media sources to change their minds or to influence the discourse. I'm sort of heartened by that, but I think there's a lot of work needs to be done in terms of education, for example.
Yes.
Telling younger people that you don't believe everything that you see, and that's something that we need now more than ever, because AI is coming out and all these deep fakes. So people really need to learn having this critical eye. So maybe that's something that I learned in mass comm. We had journal classes, how to be critical, how to vet, how to fact check, things like that. So we sort of, now that everyone can be a journalist, we also need to train everyone to fact check.
That's a good point. I was just in a forum at Mascom. I was with Joyce Pañares of Manila Standard and also Howie Severino of GMA. And we were asked that, di ba? Parang, and I always say this, na the good news for a generation, the next generation, who cannot believe anything that they see. The good news for them is they will not believe anything. No, I think that's actually, that's not necessarily a position of weakness. That's actually something to build on. Because if they don't believe anything, then may pag-asa yan. Because unlike yung mga tatay at nanay natin, and even to our generation, I said, we had this expression, if it's in black and white, So when we were growing up, we were told, if it's
Yeah.
in black and white, you can trust
Yeah.
it. Meaning, kung makita mo yan sa media, maniwala
Yeah.
ka.
Or just to see is to believe.
Di ba?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Now, you have young people growing up na, no, I don't believe
Yeah.
anything. And I do think there's an opportunity working especially with the education sector. And I agree. For me, yun lang ang mahalaga. For the education sector to then start to backstop kids
Mm.
so that they can make a judgment of, see, ano bang credible source
Yeah.
sa akin. But one thing I
Grabe.
did want to share also, I have parati ko tong kinokot, a friend of mine, a colleague, J. Mark Tordesillas, just came back from Neiman Fellowship. He always said, in that moment of crisis after Duterte left and we had a gathering and journalists were saying, bakit pa natin gagawin to? Wala naman pala nakikinig sa atin. J. Mark said, balikan niyo yung data niyo during COVID. Tumaas tayong lahat. Tumaas tayong lahat during COVID. And his point was, in times of crisis, people will actively look for us. They will actually type up the URL and go to your site, diba? To traditional media. So in times of crisis, they will look for you. Now, the other side of that is, maybe the elections wasn't a time of crisis for them.
For them.
Diba?
Yeah.
We were like, hala, yan na.
Yeah.
Diba? Yan na, babalik na si Marcos. Diba? Parang, and we were treating it like a crisis. But maybe for a lot of people, it wasn't a crisis. Maybe for a lot of people, it was just and then you flip back to the bright side to that. No, we're still relevant.
Yeah.
Pagka may crisis, pagka may lindol, pagka may baha, pagka bumabagsak ang piso, pagka mataas ang presyo ng sibuyas, they still look to us.
I want to make a point about that, but talking about film, other countries actually have started to tax the streamers, for example, Netflix, Spotify, HBO, Amazon, and they require the streamers to they take the tax and they require the streamers to invest in local content in streaming, local content for the streaming. So parang it ensures lang na it goes back into the country to that we produce homegrown content. Because now I've talked to like a lot of streamers and they say, oh, the Philippine market kasi even if we don't have Filipino content, okay lang, panoorin pa rin tayo. We have our Korean, we have our Hollywood, ganyan. So there's no incentive masyado to invest in Filipino content. But if we had a law like that, for example, where it required streamers to invest or taxed streamers so that a part of it would go to homegrown content,
subsidizing,
then everybody benefits. Everybody benefits. Because we do need to build the local audience also. We need to give them a taste of what Filipino stories, Filipino movies can be, and then once they develop that taste, then hahanapin talaga nila.
Why isn't it that simple for us? I mean, everybody says the same thing, diba? Why don't we learn from Korea? Why don't we learn from Thailand? Why isn't it that simple to just learn?
No, well, we're learning. I mean, I think in terms
I mean, I'm not talking about. I think people are trying, diba?
Yeah.
But what is it in our ecosystem that's really a big gap to just connecting audience with good content? Because we have a lot of good content.
We have a lot of good content. Yeah, I think with Korea, for example, and Korea is always the example because they're near us, but also they're so successful. But they took decades to build their creative industry. And I was talking to some Korean filmmakers, and even they were saying, when we started out in the 60s, 70s, our films were not good at all. Nobody wanted to see them. But that's why we had a quota, and we required cinemas to show a certain number of Korean films. And from there, we grew, and they developed their own audience first before they were able to export their products, quote unquote. But they needed those laws and they needed that support. And I think the problem with us is we don't have those laws. I think I'm not sure if our hands are tied by the treaties that we have with Hollywood, for example. But the only window that we have talaga for film, for example, is in the MMFF. And it's been successful but yeah, outside of the MMFF, unfortunately, it hasn't been good this year at all. So yeah, there are some like good signs, but also some bad ones. But yeah, it'll take a long time, and we can't be discouraged by it.
So, hanggang ngayon ba it's still a totally free market for for content. There's no quota system. There's no,
Yeah.
and where do you stand on that? By the way?
MMFF is the only like quota,
Mm.
quote unquote, that we had. I think we need to invest in our own industry also, because if we don't, then we'll just be overrun by the films of other countries.
Mm.
So kailangan talaga.
So where are you now with feature films? What's your relationship now with
No,
film?
I love I'm
No, I get the impression that you had to take an arm's length break
yeah.
from something that you love. What's your relationship with it now?
I am fully in love with it again. Honestly, I I was yeah. For example, with Gumburza, I was really surprised, but also encouraged by the audience reaction to it, because I was really not expecting people to come and see it. And when we would hear in the first few days reports na, because we had one of the least number of cinemas in MMFF, when we would hear reports na the screenings would be sold out, and little by little nadagdagan kami. And we would go to the cinemas and do Q&As after, and then getting that. It was a good experience for me, and I sort of recommitted myself to telling stories on the big screen and sharing that experience with audience. But now with a more focus on storytelling, more focus on genre. Yeah, so yeah, excited. I'm working on a
And it
horror.
made money?
It did.
Okay.
Yeah.
How hard is it to battle?
Looking at MMF, like why it worked, I think I heard a few reasons for it. The first reason is because the it's because, and this is both a negative and a positive, ticket prices had gotten so high that it changed the demographic that MMFF caters to. It used to be C and D. It was a festival for C and D demographic, but because of ticket prices, it's only A, B, and C who went out in the last, and a lot of class A and B had gone to see the movies. And this demographic has access to foreign films. They watch Netflix, they watch streaming, they watch DVD. So they have a different taste also. And it just so happened that the crop of films last year had sort of that level of production, and also the kinds of stories that they were looking for. So it encouraged everyone, I think, to dream bigger, to tell more complex stories, to have better production value, because we had this new sort of market coming in. But yeah, the bad side of that is that ticket prices are so expensive. 300 pesos is not a joke for a Filipino family. Imagine you have to spend for your whole family, plus transportation, plus food. It adds up. So yeah, the negative side is that while maybe the revenues are going up, maybe the number of admissions are not necessarily going up. And I think we need to really rethink that. I think that's one of the things that the new FDCP chair, Direct Joey Reyes, is really trying to fix. One of the first few meetings and one of the first few things that he did was to commission a study on ticket prices and admissions.
And why can't we just have, diba, products that doesn't divide society into, people with quote unquote more sophisticated tastes and more purchasing power versus people who are, parang it's on the it speaks to what you were saying, that there's a downside there. The downside there is, I think it's a bit defeatist when it comes to a big segment. In fact, the majority of our people. And you can't actually hang your hat on AB. We know that. We know that in media, diba? You can't. That's actually a smaller segment,
and it's hard to market to them.
And it's hard to market. It's hard to market to that. You're running up against Hollywood. You're running up against even foreign news, and so on. Diba? Parang, why can't we just have something that is just a great Filipino film and it caters to everybody?
Yeah, well, hopefully, I think if you look at, I think the data for Rewind, that cut across different demographics, A, B, C, D. Watch that. So yeah, there are examples of that, I think, and that's what now the goal for many filmmakers are. But yeah, it's good time. A lot of people have been energized by what happened last year.
Tell me a bit about some of your projects? The horror, the musical,
Ah,
the sabay-sabay ba lahat to?
I don't know.
Ah.
I don't know. What's first? Yeah.
But both are starting.
No, still writing. Still
Ah,
writing.
still
Still
writing.
writing. I think the one I'm
Why horror?
well, a few years ago. I don't want to say much. I really don't want to say much. But a few years ago, I met someone
Hmm.
na nabarang.
Na?
Nabarang.
What does that mean?
Barang is like a curse.
Okay.
Okay. It can be a deadly curse.
Mm.
And that inspired the horror film.
Okay.
So yeah, that's it.
Okay.
And then, but the one I'm really working on now is a musical actually, and I'm sorry, still nervous to talk about it because, yeah, but I'll share actually. So do you know the film Himala?
Yes.
Ishmael Bernal,
Yeah.
written by Ricky Lee,
Mm.
starring
No,
the
no,
guy,
no.
no, Honor. 20 or so years ago, that was turned into a musical called Himala is a Musical, with Sir Ricky writing the libretto and the music and lyrics by Vince De Jesus. And that musical has been staged many times over the last 20 years. It has been staged at CCP, and most recently at Makati. It had two really successful runs before the pandemic. So I recently got the permission from Sir Ricky and Sir Vince De Jesus to turn that into a film.
Wow.
And it's a tall order. So that's why I'm feeling really nervous about it. But I love kasi the musical because it's actually fun for me, fundamentally different from the film. And I was talking to Sir Ricky about it. Sir Ricky said that when he started writing Himala, the film, he had intended it to be a multi-character film about different people in Kupang, in that town. But of course, because of budget constraints and because they had Ate Guy, they focused on the Elsa character. When it was turned into a musical, it became multi-character.
I see. Okay.
So it really delved more into the lives of the people in Kupang and less on Elsa, and more on people's perspectives on her. So it really becomes more of a town story.
Okay.
So it becomes bigger, but it questions Elsa.
Okay.
It questions society, and that's and it's also really entertaining. Such beautiful music by Vince De Jesus.
Sige.
And yeah, so that's what we're working on now. Hopefully,
when you say you've gotten permission, you've gotten the rights to do this, by the time you get to that point, gaano kalayo typically yung actual theatrical release?
Oh, it really depends. It really depends. It really depends. But this one, we hope this year. Actually, we submitted it.
No, but
to
typically
MMFF,
is that
so
typically is that 1 year, 2 years?
Typically, well, yeah, it depends. In the Philippines, because the problem with us is we tend to do things really quickly. For MMFF, for example, the screening is December 25. Some films are still shooting first week of December. Week of December. And in other countries, like Hollywood, for example, because they have more budget, they have more time, they don't do that. They finish their films. They take 2-3 years to make their films. Sa atin, it's usually 1 to 2 year. 2 years is actually a long time.
Yeah, that's a luxury already.
Yeah, 2 years is a luxury. With Gumburza, we had not really a luxury, but we started the preparing kasi in 2019. We were going to start shooting 2020, but the pandemic hit. So we had actually 3 years we were on pause because of the restrictions.
And if I were a filmmaker, and I'm a precocious 19-year-old director, diba? with a good idea, and I don't know how to raise funds. Where do you even begin to get those funds?
If I was 19, I would start with a short film. Make a short film for as little money as you can, and if you have a great idea, you can execute it. I think with your phone, and it doesn't matter. You can do it with your DSLR, and it doesn't matter. Just tell a good story in a short, and then get that in festivals. There are a lot of festivals in the country, like there are regional festivals, but there's also Cinemalaya, there's also Q Cinema, for example, in Quezon City. if your film is there and people see it, then I'm sure you will get the opportunity to make your next film, and then it gets bigger and bigger.
Mm.
But there are also, for example, festivals like one I'm part of now called the Manila Film Festival, which is under City of Manila. They give grants to student filmmakers. So they give money, the student filmmakers make their short.
How much is that?
I think they were given 200 or
20,000.
200,000, which if I was a student and I had that kind of money, that's a lot. That would have been a lot for me.
How much was Encuentro?
Encuentro was 1M.
Okay.
And we got the 500,000 peso grant
Oh.
from Cinemalaya. So yeah, there are opportunities like that now. So if I was 19, that's what I would do. Do a short film.
Okay. Anyway, we're speaking with Pepe Diokno, filmmaker, writer, advertising world also. And by now you know the drill. Isang oras lang po tayo. Actually, less than 1 hour, unfortunately.
Alright.
But we've run out of time. But I still have my wine. Tuloy lang yung kwentuhan namin. You will have to leave Pepe and myself. Please do catch us again next Saturday at 9 p.m. Every 9 p.m. Saturdays ang Roundtable at Signal Channels 8 or 250. 250 po yung HD channel sa Signal TV. Catch us again. You can also catch us on YouTube. And also, at some point, I keep saying this, but at some point, we'll upload the audio on Puma Podcast. That's our company. Watch for it also. You can watch for it on Spotify or Apple Podcast or kung saan man kayo Puma Podcast. This is Roundtable. Maraming salamat po.